So we're back, and still joining us is Julie Golob. Apparently have the magical skills of destroying her computer.
Hopefully it'll work again.
Yeah, we'll make it work. We'll make it work. Technology never does what you want it to do when you need it to. So
Never.
Now, before we were rudely interrupted by technology, so I was asking you, outside of competition shooting, you were telling me, what your favorite type of shooting was, and you were telling me that pretty much competition shooting.
Pretty much, yeah. I there's something about it that, testing yourself under time and challenging courses and being able to hit small targets on demand it's just thrilling. I'm not gonna lie, it's awesome.
I mean, I remember very vividly when I started this firearm journey of mine. I looked at the competition shooting aspect of things with awe, because I was like, oh my God, you can. I was relegated to going, like a lot of people are, relegated to going to indoor ranges. You're shooting one shot per second.
Yeah.
You have the Nazi gun range masters down your back every 2 minutes. And I guess rightfully so, I guess in some sense. But there was something freeing about watching competition shooting and realizing you can go out there and compete in a way that I used to when I played basketball or some other sport that I was engaged in.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself in a lot of ways, when you tell people what you do for a living, is it something that they conceptually grasp, or do you find yourself having to break it down and tell them, okay, this is actually what a pro shooter is?
So I think that for a lot of people, it's a bizarre concept. But when you simply say, well, I basically compete and travel around, it's kind of like what you would do if you were an Olympian, but you just do it within the shooting sports. They understand it, but it's definitely a foreign concept. It's definitely not something that, like, whoa, a little bit unexpected.
Now, do you think it's when you mention competition shooting? Because I know for me, I think it's harder for people to grasp the idea that I'm just an enthusiast shooter. Having a context in a lot of ways, I guess, makes people a little bit more comfortable with the idea. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yeah. I think so. And there's also all these levels. I think that, shooting is the one area, even more so than like golf. You have people who are, oh, okay, yeah, I might own my grandpa's gun or whatever. And then you have an enthusiast, and then you have a super enthusiast, and then you have professionals. And it's a really complex kind of environment.
No, absolutely. And for a lot of people, I think, too, the competition aspect of things can seem a little intimidating. I know for me, it was slightly. I mean, I was so far down the hole at that point, I didn't care what I need to do. I would give my second life, future kids, all of that stuff to keep going. But for people who are entertaining the idea, but it does seem a little bit intimidating, what advice would you have for them?
The beauty of the shooting sports is that there are categories and divisions and classifications based on all sorts of ability levels. So if you go to a local club match, I may be there, but we're really not competing against one another. And I think that's really important. I think the shooting sports haven't done a really good job of telling people that either, because if you know that you can show up and there's going to be somebody else that's new too, then now you have like a buddy in crime, right? and it can be even more fun that way. But a lot of times all they see are these super like crazy awesome 3-gun competitions on television, like, oh, I can't do that. And so it's kind of a hard thing for them to want to get started in. But there are so many grassroots programs out there, and it's really a cool thing.
Yeah. I think for me too, at least when I first started getting into it, I think I was over-consumed with the gear. And I think for a lot of people, and you can tell me if you disagree with this or agree with it, I try to tell people who kind of want to get into it, don't over-consume yourself with the gear. That stuff will come and always be there. Just enjoy the shooting component of it.
I would agree with that completely. Yeah, it's really easy to get wrapped up in the latest gadget. And at the end of the day, as long as it's got a trigger and sights,
pretty much,
you've got ammo.
You're good to go, right?
You're good to go.
So outside of the shooting aspect of things, you're also an accomplished author.
Well, I have a book, yes.
So talk to me about your book, as people who are not so familiar with it. What was this book about?
Sure. It's called Shoot Your Guide to Shooting in Competition, and it's basically a primer for people who are interested in getting into the shooting sports but really don't know where to start. And it covers everything from bullseye to clay busting to what I do. And it kind of gives you the steps to make it happen.
So what motivated you to want to actually write a book? Because it's something I'm actually considering, and beginning the process. It's ridiculously overwhelming.
It is. It is. And, basically the idea for the book came from the fact that I was writing so many emails. Julie, how do I get started in the shooting sports?
Gotcha.
Julie, how do I get started in the shooting sports? And it was like, wow, this is not an easy 2-paragraph question to answer. I could write a book about this literally.
Yeah.
And so it worked out. But it is a lot of work, but it is really, really a rewarding experience. It's like one of those things that when you hold your book in your hand, you're like, wow, I did this.
Yeah, right.
I did this.
See,
Cool.
I'm hopefully we'll get to have that feeling. I'm procrastinating like crazy. But as you are a mother.
Yes.
And as a mother, I'm pretty sure, considering everything you do in your life revolves around firearms in some way. And I know that safety is also going to be a big deal for you as well. And that's me leading into, you also have a book about children's gun safety. Am I correct?
Yes, I'm working on it. Very final stages of it. And, our industry does such a great job with Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program. And of course, the NSSF has the Project Child Safe. And I am always looking for more tools. And because my children have exposure to firearms that are a little bit different than, a lot of it different from a lot of other people, I wanted something that takes it to the next step, that actually talks and shows different guns and the parts of guns. So we can really kind of start to demystify them instead of just saying, stop, don't touch.
Yeah.
Let's teach them a little bit so that they aren't so curious. So as they might do something that, could be unfortunate and an accident could happen.
So when you run into parents who express a concern for gun safety for their kids and, keeping a gun at home, what's the one big thing that you tell them? Because I know I get the question a lot and I'm like, I don't have any kids. So for me, it's a harder question to answer because I can largely sympathize, but empathizing with the concern is a little different or hard or challenging for me.
Yeah, I think the single most important thing is not to hide it. You have to teach, you have to show, you have to be open. And anytime your kids want to talk about guns, have the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, even my 3-year-old, if she asks about a gun, we stop what we're doing and answer her questions. And I think that's really important because now there's no fear associated with it. And it's just, this is something I need to learn about. And yes, it's something I'm not allowed to touch, but there's that demystifying process that goes on because they're so curious. Kids are like cats. I mean, they're like, they got to know and they got to paw and everything and they got to know everything that's going on.
So what would you recommend, or even can you recommend, is there a certain age where you would say, okay, this is the earliest I would teach a child how to shoot?
I can't put an age on it. And that's only because every child is different. And as a parent, you realize this. I have a 3-year-old who wants to shoot and my 8-year-old is like, I'd like to do that. And so every child and their interest level is different. Every child's maturity level is different. And one thing I like to tell parents is if your child knows and understands the primary safety rules, then that's a good start. But they have to know them and they have to understand them, truly understand them. So there's no real age to put on that.
Yeah, I get that question a lot too. I'm still trying to figure out why people ask me that question. I don't have any kids. And I do
you must know.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I guess I was dead on in many ways because I usually tell them that. I'm like, it's kind of a hard question to answer because you know your kid better than I do. And it's largely dependent on the maturity level of that individual child. And so I can't just give you an arbitrary number and say, when they're 2 years old, just put the gun in your hand and just let them rip loose, right?
Yeah. I know 30-year-old people I wouldn't, I wouldn't do that with. So, it all depends.
Now, as a female shooter, have you encountered any difficulties from being a woman shooter versus, say, my experience would be as a man? Like as women, female pro shooters, has that always been a thing, or is that something that's just really kind of taken off here in the recent?
There are definitely pioneering women. When I was growing up that I looked up to, Kippy Latham, Kay Michalik. Sharon Zafiro, they were like my female idols.
Yeah.
But definitely now we see so many more women on the range and so many more junior girl shooters. And it's really exciting to see and be a part of that. It went from being me being the only young girl on the range to now, you go and you see it all the time. So it's really a great time.
What do you think is the biggest driving factor for that?
Yeah, I think that more than ever, we have this feeling that, we can do anything as women. And, what typically, a lot of dads used to just save certain activities for their sons. My dad was like, well, my son doesn't want to do that. So if you want to do it, let's go. I was his buddy and a total daddy's girl. So I think you're seeing a lot more of that. And I mean, once you do it, once you start shooting, you realize how fun it is. And the gun doesn't care whether you're a man or a woman or a boy or a girl. So
who do you think is the easiest to teach to shoot? And I ask those people this question now because I get so many different answers. Men or women? Who tends to take instructions easier, men or women, when it comes to teaching people how to shoot?
Personally, I would say
your
women.
bias.
I would say women only because there are some men who don't like to learn from women. So
Gotcha.
In my experience, they get a little bit like, oh, I know, I'm doing that kind of thing. But, that's a generalization. There are certainly both sides of the coin. You have some challenging students every now and again, and gender doesn't matter.
Now, when you were, I have this question before we're going to break, because when you said that, it brought something to mind. When you were younger and you were dating, right? Because you've been shooting your entire life, essentially. How was that in terms of the guys that you encountered, who I'm pretty sure I may or may not have known your abilities with the firearm?
I don't think I've ever dated someone that wasn't a shooter, a gun person.
Ah, yeah. Okay. All right.
So I guess that. Actually, no, there was one, and he was quite taken aback by it. But
really? Okay.
Yeah, but he was fine with it.
Now, were you the better shooter out of those guys that you dated, or were they the better shooter?
See, I've always been pretty smart about my selection of who I've dated as well. I've always dated like rifle shooters or shotgun shooters.
Gotcha. So there's no no way for competition in that regard.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Smart woman. Okay. Well, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about the new Smith & Wesson M2.0.
That's right.